Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of By the Way to Purposeful Procurement. I'm Philip Ideson. I'm joined by my co-host, Fine-Tune CEO Rich Ham. Rich,
Hey,
thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So in episode 2, Rich, Kelly Barner and I, we outlined our thesis for our year of discovery that we'll be charting on the By the Way to Purposeful Procurement podcast. And today we're welcoming our first guest of the series, which is Oliver Hurrey. Oliver is one of the world's foremost experts on purposeful procurement. He's dedicated his career to advancing sustainability and decarbonization initiatives across supply chains. And we invited Oliver on the podcast series to explore the ways in which procurement can champion sustainability and decarbonization as a key value measure. So with that said, Oliver, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, welcome. Whenever I get referred to as a foremost expert or anything, to be honest, it fills me full of dread. But yeah, I can do my best. But look, it's great to be here, and massive fan of you, Phil, and Rich. Obviously, I know you well, and it's great to be in this little trio.
Makes me happy to see you, Ollie.
Even though me and Rich look like basically the same person, I think we can go over it.
It's my English doppelganger. Yeah.
Well, as long as we don't descend into talking football, I think we'll be good today. That can take up the entire podcast between us, I think. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your background, first of all, Oliver. You're working with so many different groups to drive change. I wonder if you could give us a brief overview of what you're currently involved in and how did purposeful business really become your focus?
Yeah, I wear a lot of hats. I think if there was a competition for wearing hats, I would win it. And part of that is the fact that in the world we're living in, well, whether it's in sustainability or procurement, collaboration is essential. It's an overused word. I find almost impossible to say these days because I know what everyone's thinking, which is what does that actually mean? No one really knows what it means. But the importance of working together to solve big problems that are shared by suppliers, by buyers, by industries. It's a huge challenge for business to do because it doesn't always come naturally to business. So that means lots of initiatives need to form, lots of initiatives need help, lots of meetings to be chaired and things like that. So that's where I come. I've been doing that 20 years, helping companies to collaborate on the challenges in sustainability and in supply chains. That has involved invariably working with procurement, but increasingly working with procurement more than ever before. And there are too many initiatives in the world. I'm sure everyone agrees that they're getting invited to various groups and activities and events and meetings and all sorts of working groups and everything else. You could argue there's too many podcasts in the world. Obviously not. There's
not
always
this
room
one,
for
of
one
course.
What a horrible argument.
Exactly. So a part of my mission for those 20 years has been about helping companies to work together better. But especially in the last 5 years, I've been trying to get the collaborations themselves to be better because there's a proliferation of collaborations and we're sort of stretching people's ability to work together. Because collaboration as a word for me means doing stuff together, not just talking about it. And I think that's absolutely critical. And that's where ultimately businesses need help to work together, not just talk together. And I think particularly on sustainability and particularly sustainable supply chains, we do need to get some stuff done. We can't just carry on talking about it forever. So yeah, it's important to do that properly. So that's what I do. I basically chair meetings for a living, which is probably a little bit more than that, but that's where I came into it. And as for procurement, I mean, it's been a fascinating journey. So my first job out of college was actually running Meet the Buyer events for the Chartered Institute Purchasing and Supply, as they were called back then. I think it's Procurement and Supply now. But so I was helping procurement professionals to sort of systematically, efficiently, easily find new sources of supply for what they wanted. And I was all about trying to get those buyers together to share knowledge, share best practice as well. I then got into running sustainability meetings for the sustainability profession. And I always knew that those two professions had a lot in common. They're both kind of perhaps underappreciated, full of talented people, people who had to be experts on things that no one was an expert on, ultimately working together. So after many, many years of working with sustainability professionals who were desperate to get procurement's attention and help them embed sustainability in supply chains, I really realized that I could spend much more time working for procurement to help them make it procurement's idea and make it the future of the procurement profession. So it's been a tale of two professions, really, for me. And seeing them getting together and working together is, been a highlight of the last couple of years, definitely.
So I think you undersell a little bit of the just chairing meetings all day. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the Scope 3 peer group. I know that that's an organization that you have founded, that you chair, but that's growing and going from strength to strength. Had a meeting, I think, as we record this last week in London that was very successful. And I just want to kind of call that out and just kind of give the opportunity to talk a little bit about Scope 3 peer group.
Yeah, that's very kind, Phil. Yeah. So where that comes from is about 5 years ago, and a lot happened 5 years ago as I sort of started out on this journey, doing my own thing and really being unleashed to be able to do all the things that people wanted me to do. About 5 years ago, 10 different companies moaned at me in the space of a week or so about supply chain decarbonisation. And that's always been probably the area I've spent most of my time in. And Scope 3, I mean, we do ourselves no justice with all this jargon, but the realities are, Scope 3 was a bit of a huge challenge for these companies, and they were all roughly in the same part of London. So GSK asked me to host a meeting for half a day as a meeting host for hire, as I am, apparently. And we basically spent half a day crying on each other's shoulders about how difficult it was. And we wrote a big, long list of questions about Scope 3. And we thought, we'll just send them off to the Science Based Targets Initiative. They'll provide us with an answer, and that'll be it. And so we did that. And the Science Based Targets Initiative wrote back and said, we get 1,000 of these emails a day, and we can't answer any of these questions. So good luck. And is there any chance you could be a kind of quasi-advisory board or support group for the SBTI? So, we kept meeting. And then, of course, COVID hit, so we went on to Zoom. And then there was really no barriers. And 5 years later, we're over 3,000 Scope 3 practitioners, 51% of who sit in procurement. Mm-hmm. So we recently just tipped the barrier of where these people actually sit and work in the organisation into procurement. It's majority now in procurement. And so that's very exciting news. But we're just trying to navigate all of the noise on Scope 3. So not yet another initiative. In fact, the more initiatives there are on Scope 3, the more the peer groups needed to kind of navigate all of this noise. The more platforms, the more tools, the more policy, the more regulation. It's just helping the professional to really understand what on earth's going on in the world. And now, obviously, as all good collaboration should do, we're doing stuff. And most of the stuff that the group wants to do, because there's so many people in it now, are already being done somewhere by some initiative, non-profit or commercial or otherwise. And so majority of what we do is funnel people to find the right project or initiative that they should just jump into. Mm-hmm. Because I'm fixated with the fact that we keep proliferating action rather than doubling down on it. So I think that's one part of it. And then there's a whole host of things like carbon pricing, which we'll touch upon, I'm sure, that the group has discovered that no one is doing. And if we club together, we can do it. So it's chairing a lot of meetings, but it's also being an agony aunt and a group therapist, and ultimately just trying to make it easier for people to make faster, more confident decisions, because people need to make fast decisions, not perfect decisions on carbon reduction, and ultimately they need to be confident about those decisions. And the best way to give someone confidence, copy someone who's got the same job as you, who's done it a little bit better or a little bit earlier than you, and copy and don't make the same mistakes. So that's the principle of it. Thanks for mentioning last week. Last week was, frankly, the best week of my career. We had 430 people from every part of the world you can imagine, from every industry you can imagine, meeting for 3 days solid to actually get some stuff done, to make some decisions, to decide some things, to take some action. It was pretty good fun.
Phil, if I could comment on the Scope 3 peer group a little bit, I actually met Ollie first at his event in Chicago last summer, and there's a genius to what he's brought together with this group in that, and I don't know if these percentages are in the neighborhood of correct, Ollie, but my observation from the event was there was something in the neighborhood of 40% of attendees and members were from corporate procurement, mm-hmm. and about 40% were from corporate sustainability, yep. and then 20% were solution providers. And these numbers can't be on the mark, but it was just kind of my anecdotal observation. But the genius is, it goes back to what Ollie talked about at the outset about not just talking about things, mm-hmm. but getting things done. And so here in the room together, you have sustainability experts going, well, here's where we need to get. Here's what we need to accomplish. You have procurement folks going, well, here's what I would need in order to accomplish that. And you've got solution providers, including my firm, sitting there in the room going, oh, well, we're good at that. We can help with that. And they're all together, sure, talking, yes, but also, plotting, getting things done. Was this, I have to imagine this was intentional, this cocktail of backgrounds that you brought together in this group. Is that fair, Ollie?
That is one of the best descriptions of what it is I've heard. Even that's better than any way I've described it. It's exactly the kind of balance and the intention. And I don't want to run an events business. I hate conferences. I'm sure everyone else feels the same about conferences and events. And you get sponsored to death, pitched to death, bored to death. So I wanted to run a meeting for the group that was all about action, because they learn about the kind of why everywhere else. This is a group about the what and the how. And I think solution providers are absolutely critical to this, but so many of these sort of activities kind of cloud the fact that these people are there to try and pitch something and kind of sell something, but also just convince people. Whereas ultimately the solution providers that are in the room want to be able to say, we can actually do something for this group. And as you say, I think the way that those procurement sustainability can describe the problem, analyze the problem, diagnose the problem, and then solution providers can say, instead of I can sell you something, they say I can solve that. And then the money and the business and the work and the clients all looks after itself. And so I'm glad you highlighted that. I think we need to create the right conditions for everyone to make faster and more confident decisions. And faster and more confident decisions means investing in solutions and consultants, but without having it rammed down your throat. And again, it comes back to the point that I think everyone appreciates this. You're far more likely to decide to do something and buy something and change something if you get the idea from a peer, not from someone who's paid to try and make you decide that. So I think it's ultimately creating the conditions where more stuff can get done more confidently. And it's all about trust. If you build that trust in that decision-making process, procurement's about trust, sustainability is about trust. So yeah, thanks, Phil.
Ollie, I was saying to Phil before you joined the Zoom that one of the observations I had from having been in the room with the Scope 3 peer group last summer was that, particularly as it relates to the procurement professionals that were in attendance, it was the most purpose-driven group of procurement professionals that I had ever been around. And I don't know that I would ever say that I had been in a room with a whole room full of people that I all thought these are really purpose-driven professionals. We spoke to one earlier today, actually, who works for a large not-for-profit that's doing amazing work. So there are such environments out there, but I really found it to be a uniquely and especially purpose-driven group of procurement professionals. And I assume that was on display in London again last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fairly obvious what we're trying to do, in the years ahead is just get rid of responsible and sustainable procurement. It should be just normal procurement. We don't need extra special superheroes in the room to be sort of shined. The more you kind of say these people are a special breed of people, the less normal it looks like. So I appreciate what you're saying, but ultimately, as I said, we're trying to make it just normal for procurement. And I think, like anything, when you cross the chasm and you drive change, there are some early adopters. There's some people who cross that chasm and say, hey, it's great over here being a procurement professional who's built more purpose into my day job and the way I do it. I'm enjoying my job more. I'm delivering more value for my business. I'm looking through fresh lenses and innovation at ways to do things. Everything's better over here. Come join us, procurement. Come join us, the rest of procurement. And so the realities are, I think that's where there is some people who get this, and they get this at various points in their career. We've seen the older, grayer people getting this. We've seen the young procurement professionals of the future coming in and demanding this and saying that's the only way that I will work. And I think between that, we're driving, it's change management. The future of the procurement profession, I put it to you that I don't think the procurement profession can carry on the way it is in many ways. I think it's that race to the bottom. It's the, just cutting costs. And of course, everything that's going on in the world, that constantly gets stretched and tested all of the time. But the procurement profession cannot carry on being treated the way it is and not getting the respect it deserves for the amazing stuff that it does do if we just look through one lens. And so regardless of whether it's protecting people or planet and all of that nice stuff, take all of that saving the world stuff to one side. Let's talk about the profession of procurement, because that's the thing that I think is the most important thing, because that will drive change. And it's the future of that profession that I think, whether it's animals, plants, people, carbon emissions, it doesn't really matter. I think change will be driven by a profession that realizes that it can do a lot more and should be allowed to do a lot more.
Ali, there's another group that you work with that is pursuing these same ambitions you're describing, and that's the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. I think the audience would love to hear a little bit about the organization, its roots, your involvement, and what it's accomplishing.
Sure. So that's hat 2.
By the way, before you answer, Ali, I've got to say, while it may be true that if there were a hat-wearing competition, you would win it, I think we can all agree that would be a horrible competition. It's just a terrible nobody would watch. It's a bad competition. But sure, you would win.
Well, I'm a man who clearly needs a hat. Otherwise, I'm going to get very cold. I know the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, again, almost exactly the same time period 5 years ago. And when I heard that 2 chief procurement officers, who are inspirational chief procurement officers, who I'd known for a while, had come up with this concept of making it procurement's idea to embed sustainability and not have it dictated to them, after pretty much 15 years of helping sustainability professionals knock on procurement's door and plead with them to give a damn about this, to have procurement say, we're going to lead this and we're going to do it in our language. It was like, no, sustainability doesn't need to learn procurement language. Procurement can just do this in their own language. And I think that was a real fascinating moment. So it's a non-profit created by those 2 CPOs, which has caught fire over the last 5 years. And we've got CPOs from every walk of life and country participating. We've got their teams engaged and participating. And it is very much a grassroots movement. It's trying to focus on the professional and the profession. And of course, there's a million different procurement networks out there. I mean, wow, procurement loves to network and get together and go to events and be in huddles and advisory boards and all sorts of networks. But most of those are set up in a way which is trying to milk them like cows a little bit and work with them. And ultimately, the pledge was about trying to say, look, let's empower the procurement professional. Let's not try and sell them some stuff. Let's get them to work this out. It's a change management program for procurement. And that means that they're far more likely to then want to invest in those solutions and embed those ways of working. So it's been phenomenal. And, there's meetings happening all over the world. There's chapters in Singapore, Kenya, USA, UK. Everyone can find their kind of local group, if that makes sense. We've got industry chapters. We've got topic chapters. You can imagine the Scope 3 chapter of procurement professionals I spend a lot of time with, and that's a real thriving group of people who are, again, wanting to understand Scope 3 in procurement language. What does it actually mean for them? And then, World Sustainable Procurement Day is the big milestone of the year, the 21st of March, where, it's like a 24-hour live marathon of knowledge, waking up with the Fijian procurement team last year. When the sun came up in Fiji, they were presenting about what they'd been doing on the island of Fiji and on sustainable procurement. And it follows all the way, the sun all the way around the earth. And we learn about best practice on procurement sustainability in pretty much every time zone, every topic, every industry. And again, thinking about it for the profession, not just people and planet. So it's a wonderful exercise, wonderful team who run it, run by an enormous group of volunteers who are just passionate procurement professionals all over the world. And for procurement, by procurement, that's the phrase that seems to excite and stick, and I think encapsulates what it's all about. It's finally procurement doing this for themselves rather than consultants or sustainability professionals ramming it down their throats and demanding that they do it. It's procurement discovering that it's their future, and it's exciting, and it's valuable.
That's amazing. Ali, you've got, such a unique perspective, I would say, to witness purposeful procurement, to see it happening. And I want to put you on the spot a little here because we want to paint a picture of what's possible for our listeners. And so can you share, and it doesn't have to be a top 3 list, but can you share 2 or 3 examples, things that have actually happened where you've seen this team of people get together, tackle a problem, and produce a purposeful outcome, through their efforts in procurement? I would love to hear a story or two.
Yeah, no, sure. There's a couple that spring to mind. They are mostly around decarbonization, but there's great stuff happening in social procurement as well. I know that's a sore topic in North America around diversity, equality, and inclusion at the moment. But there is some wonderful stuff happening about investing in social enterprises, as we call them in Europe, or more diverse suppliers, which really is about innovation. It's not about diversity, equality, and inclusion. Anyway, there's plenty of options there, but there's a couple of things. So one that's very timely is the work that's been happening on carbon pricing. So literally 12 months ago, I crammed actually slightly too many CPOs into a very dark room at the end of a very long conference day. And you could see the look in their eye was, what are we doing in here? This room is pretty stuffy and I'm pretty tired. And we essentially, a group of procurement leaders, had come up with this concept, which was about embedding the cost of carbon into tenders decisions and coming up with a standardized methodology for doing that, which shorthand is really just helping procurement look at carbon in the same way they look at cost price, in the same ways that they do those things, and actually make some big decisions based upon it. And that room, despite being slightly uncomfortable, you could see the looks on their faces. They felt like this, of all the things that procurement can do, this felt like something that was in their wheelhouse squarely. And it was about, this is something that we can do for ourselves to really drive change. And 12 months on, we had a couple of hundred procurement sustainability professionals collaborating in, 6, 7, 8 workshops, including Chicago, where we met. And just last week or the week before, we produced the principles, the carbon pricing principles. If you go to spp.earth, Sustainable Procurement Pledge website, you can find the principles, you can download them, and you can start using them. And I'm now chairing a couple of dozen of some of the largest companies in the world who are now embedding those principles into the way that they work. So you've got people who are looking at tenders, asking for suppliers for product carbon footprint data. Those suppliers, more often than not, don't have that data. So they're coming back and saying either we haven't got it, or more interestingly, they're often coming back and saying, let's have a conversation. Let's have a call. Let's find out what you're asking for, why you're asking for it, because we want to win this tender. And ultimately, it's created a whole new conversation with the supplier base that's incentivizing them to collect data, decarbonize, baseline, all of those things. And it's really fascinating, the impact that it's had as what many people look at and think as a technical commercial project. It's actually a behavior change project. It's really created a whole new atmosphere in between suppliers and buyers, and has created a sort of an action on suppliers' side to come back with new ideas, more data, more information, and started that ball rolling. But so in essence, if the basics of the methodology are that you ask your suppliers for product carbon footprint data for a tender. If they can't provide it, you take their kind of standard emission factor, they're the general numbers for the industry, and you add 50%. And then you use, the principle suggests that you use the European Emissions Trading Scheme, I think it's 80 euros a ton, something like that, and you treat it like you add it to the cost. So you can judge it based on currency, based on that numbers. And obviously you're not charging the supplier for the carbon. It's about making a decision based on those numbers. And as soon as you ask the supplier and say, that's how we're going to judge you, that commercial account manager is suddenly rushing back into the business saying, right, come on, we need some information, we need some action, we need some results. And it's early days, obviously, for people embedding those principles, but the response so far has been far more conversations with suppliers, with the right people in the suppliers, about actually thinking about carbon and how they might do things differently. So that's been, again, one of the highlights of my career, I think, to see practically procurement doing something that will drive extraordinary change, I think, in the way that people are procuring. Very proud. I just chair the meetings, obviously, but it's been fascinating to pull together. And the likes of Haleon, Bayer, Givaudan, big companies in chemicals and pharma and consumer health are rolling this out. And there's already great examples from Lego and Volvo and other companies that have been doing this for a while. And it's nice to see it happening, and to see procurement professionals just get it and go, I get this, I understand it.
Do you feel that this is one of the areas where procurement is pretty uniquely positioned to drive change in decarbonization, in sustainability, where we have the ability to do that, but it's actually by driving the market to care about it is the role that we can play, and this is one of the most impactful things that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely, and I always felt that sustainability was going through that pinch point of procurement person and account manager or commercial person. And you're asking two professions to talk about something that they understandably shouldn't really understand. I mean, it's complex even for sustainability professionals. So that pinch point is really a pinch point for all supply chains. We're sort of funneling lots of stuff between that relationship. And it's really tough for those two professions to get it. So if you can bake it into, you will potentially win more business if you do this, and you'll get a better price and better cost, and you'll meet your more strategic goals if you're procurement. That's the language those two professions want to understand. So it feels quite simple, actually. I mean, it's not easy to do because there's a lot of behavior change, a lot of internal stakeholders that need convincing. And, and even in the early conversations of the pilots, there's still companies making decisions on suppliers in China over supplier in Switzerland because the cost is just massively different, even if you factor in the carbon. So there's still good commercial decisions being made, but it is still driving change in all of those suppliers, even if it's just helping them realize that this is now a key factor. So it's good to see.
It certainly is, Ollie. It had to feel like a rather significant moment in what probably feels like a really long journey to getting corporations to inject considerations related to their suppliers' behaviors into their cost analysis. The actual cost is not just the price proposed, but actually what that company does in the world and what the impacts of what they do are. And, I would have to think that this project has felt like it was playing a critical role in a journey to, a future state where that might be the norm.
Yeah, it's just not a fluffy project. Mm-hmm. So often these projects in responsible, sustainable, whatever you want to call it stuff can feel a little fluffy. This feels serious. This feels technical. It feels commercial. It feels deeply commercial. I've often joked that one day we need a sustainable sales pledge to get the other side of the coin kind of understanding how to build a competitive advantage. There was another story just on that point of competitive advantage, if I may.
Yeah.
So from last week, we had one of the world's biggest property companies on stage talking about what good supplier engagement looks like on decarbonisation. And alongside that big property company was relatively young guy called a sustainability coordinator, sort of title that, no conference in theory would throw on the stage, from a painting and decorating family company in the UK, just in a room full of massive multinationals. And it was the best presentation of the whole 3 days. And the reason why that is the guy stood there and said, when the property company came to us and said they wanted us to look at sustainability and carbon, instead of looking at it as a tick box exercise, which you could easily do, we thought, is this a competitive advantage for us? If we were to go back and show how we can paint their buildings and decorate their offices more sustainably, would it be a competitive advantage? And we're talking about a company that the name ends in and Sons. I mean, we're talking about a small family kind of, business that normally would go, what? And I know the guy said he thanked the property company immediately because he said he was the reason why he had a new job, because, a new and exciting job. But he said, look, we went there and went to our paint suppliers and said, what can you do for us? Because, we've got this communication. We feel like we can win more business. What can you do for us? And of course, your average painter and decorator does not want to change his paint. He's been painting for 20 years with the same paint. He doesn't want to change his paint. So they had to go to the suppliers and say, hey, can you take certain paints off the portal, take them off. What can we replace them with? How can we make this kind of just a choice edit, just make it happen? And it was amazing what they then came back with. And they're investing in communities. They send the waste paint back to community projects as well. So there's a nice little social side to the story. But then the funniest thing was one of the biggest paint suppliers in the world was in the audience, and they stood up and said, "Hey, we're probably your supplier. We're probably supplying this paint." Something you had, of course, everyone uses that property company for their offices in the room. So you had 4 tiers of companies. You had the people who need offices, the people who supply offices, the people who paint offices, and the people who had the paint, all in a conversation in the room, saying all about competitive advantage. It was all about saying, if we get this right, we can get more business out of this. And, the sustainability professionals are sat there thinking, there's no talk of saving the world here, but you can see that there's 4 tiers getting this, making change happen. And that, I think, was very exciting as well. And just, unexpected in many ways.
Ollie, those are exactly what I was looking for. Fantastic stories. We're going to get you out of here shortly, but I know you're aware, because you and I have talked about this project on the side. We're on a journey to explore the notion that there are certain flaws in the ways that corporate procurement departments and the people within them tend to be incentivized, and we're exploring the potential harms that those flaws might be doing, and how they might stand in the way of more purposeful procurement. My question to you is this, and I don't know if you've thought about this exact question, but you've probably thought around it at least. If you could wave a magic wand and somehow immediately change one thing, and it can be a couple of things, about the ways that corporate procurement professionals tend to be incentivized, what would it be? What would you change?
Yeah, it's a good question. These magic wand questions are always interesting, aren't they? Because they're they make you think. I think I'm going to sort of talk around it a little bit. Maybe I'll arrive at what my magic wand thing is. But so some of the best examples of baking sustainability into KPIs and into financial reward come from the likes of Schneider Electric. So Schneider Electric's work in a zero carbon project. If you look at the incentivization of everyone in that business, it drives every single person in that business to act differently. So when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, well, there's lots of good examples about procurement KPIs and how procurement professionals are rewarded. But what I love about what Schneider Electric do is everyone is impacted by what procurement do. So everyone sees procurement in a different way. They're like, hey, you guys if you act more sustainably and reduce your carbon, I get more money thanks to procurement. And so I think it is about obviously changing the performance, reviews and the KPIs and the metrics that procurement's factored in. But if procurement's going to get the respect and the honor it deserves for the great decisions it can make, then seeing everyone in the business incentivized by what procurement can deliver, I think is really exciting. So that was one thought. I think in terms of the way that everything's driven by incentives. We are human nature is to look after yourself first, and everyone else second. So if you can get that incentivization structure right, look, it comes down to the age-old boring phrase of being about value. Procurement has searched for this mythical, it's not mythical, but it's searched for this kind of vague thing called shared value forever. I mean, procurement conferences for decades have been talking about the concept of shared value. So I think it's about procurement being allowed to explore what that value looks like and being listened to when it says, hey, business, I've got some ideas about what this value looks like. It feels like forever it's about procurement being told to buy things, being told that you will be rewarded in this way. And so maybe the magic wand is that procurement actually will have the opportunity to maybe get that level of seniority, be on the board, whatever it is that again, that get talked about a lot, but be able to say to the business, listen to us, we've got some ideas, we've got some innovation, we've got some ways in which you can hit your bonus internal client. And we would like to be incentivized more on doing those new things, those new approaches, that buying those new things that will help you achieve your bonuses, whether there is a net zero target or a financial target or whatever it is. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but that's certainly how I feel that there's an opportunity for procurement's incentivization to be much more aligned to the business, and for procurement to be allowed to innovate more for the business and with the business, and talk more, lead more with them rather than respond to their demands.
Now, in all the meetings that you chair and all the companies that you talk to, and both through the number of different councils that you work with, are you seeing procurement teams baking incentivization, or more procurement teams bringing incentivization around sustainability or decarbonization into their metrics? Is it still at the early adopter phase, or are we starting to see some growth, some momentum in the number of companies that are incented in that way?
It's always difficult for me because I'm immersed in it. And I'm also of the type to just say, yeah, it's everywhere and it's growing and it's great and everyone should do it. I think the reality is it's not as prevalent as it could be and it should be. The movement for sustainable procurement, or procurement to just become more sustainable, to act more, is evident. I mean, wow, the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, tens of thousands of people rising up from their desks and saying, I want to do something, is evidence that change is happening and change can happen. That's true. But I think, we're still driven by the certain metrics and the certain KPIs. And I think what's going on in the world at the moment doesn't help, because it's the certain metrics and certain things that are kind of causing us to take our eye off things. I have to say, one thing that does frustrate me, after many, many years of listening to, procurement talk about what's hot at the moment or what's a priority, it always feels like every year there's a sort of economic kind of crisis or challenge. That can't be true. It's sort of almost feels like a thing that's just said, oh, the headwinds at the moment. When has there ever been a great year where that's not been a problem? Of course, cost is always a problem. It feels like that's just an excuse that gets trotted out, oh, inflation. Well, come on. It may be briefly bad, but let's look at the scheme of things here. So I feel like procurement does talk itself, and I think business talks itself into sort of saying we must always talk about cost, because there's lots of expensive consultants who like to say that that's something you must be constantly doing. So I think it's everyone's responsibility to push back on that and say, no, it is about value. It is about long term. It is about the next 5 years, not the next 1 year, 2 years, next quarter. And it takes bravery. And we need people who are willing to sort of stand up and say, no, this is the right thing for me to be challenging my boss with, or challenging upwards with. Because one thing I've always said, and I think this is very true, if you say that and your boss doesn't get it, and you don't get the opportunity or the reward or the freedom to try it, trust me, there's lots of CPOs now who will hire you if you have that thinking. And so part of the things we often bluntly talk about in the procurement pledge is, if your boss doesn't get it, you can try and convince them, or you can just leave and go and join someone who will gladly embrace you and your new ways of thinking, because there's plenty of businesses out there that get this and will continue to get it regardless of what politics or markets movements say. So there, I think there's so many leaders on this now. Talent will drive this as well.
Ali, we're going to close out on this one, but I want to close the loop on that thought. There's a phrase that I've heard you use as you and I have discussed this topic of incentives related to procurement driving more sustainable business. And you've said, well, it's not like the practitioner has to wait for the rules to be aligned just perfectly. They can ask for permission to consider other factors in their decision making. They can be leaders as it relates to implementing, the sorts of values that you're working on through Scope 3 Peer Group and SPP into their purchasing decisions. They don't have to wait for the rules to change. Your comments?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we're seeing and rewarding and highlighting some of the individual professionals that are really doing some bold things. Companies like people who do bold things. It just feels like often procurement isn't seen as the place to do bold things. Well, let's change that. Let's be disruptive. And I think as long as it's backed up with proof and evidence that it can succeed and results, but that's the same with everyone else. I do think that benchmarking is key. It's a phrase that's overused again, and procurement's addicted to benchmarking. But bosses want to know, often the first thing that a boss will say when you go to them and say, "Can I try this?" is anyone else trying it? What are our competitors doing? And I think if you can, that's where collaborative element comes in. If you can go and find communities like Sustainable Procurement Pledge and kind of bend the ear of someone. And often think outside the box. If you buy mint for toothpaste, for example, go and find the guy at the chocolate company who buys mint. You don't have to talk to your competitor. Go and find the guy who buys mint in for chocolate and says, what is it could I do with my mint suppliers in northern India to try and secure that supply and make it more resilient? Well, it's a water-stressed area. They use diesel generators to, they hide money under the bed, and there's plenty of problems that are common in those categories that you can learn from. And sort of going back to your boss and saying, I've learned from others who are doing great work on this, that if we can sort out that corruption piece, if we can get more traceability, if we can invest more in those that are, got good energy efficiency and renewable energy or water stress, we can secure that supply, et cetera, et cetera. Bosses will be impressed by that, that knowledge, that ability to benchmark, the ability to think differently. That should be baked into the category strategy as a resilience piece. And again, the way we are in the world, language is going to be really important. Resilience, security of supply. I think resilient supply chains is going to be something, because we're entering chaotic periods. So the ability to sell resilience to your business and show in evidence how you're going to be resilient for the coming years and avert more crisis, then I think that can be a real powerful thing.
Well, Oliver, we want to thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I know that as we kind of go on this journey over the next year, sustainability is going to be a big part of what procurement can do to think broadly and go beyond kind of the savings. And, we're on this journey. We've talked about this value beyond savings for a long time. We've never really figured out as a community what that means. As you said before, we've talked about it. Now's the time to actually figure out how we can put that into practice and close that gap, that talking to action gap that we talked about right at the beginning. So one last time, Oliver, I want to thank you so much for sharing your experiences and perspectives with us on the podcast today.
No, you're very welcome. And look, procurement gets stuff done. That's why I love procurement. After years of working with sustainability professionals who do get stuff done, but they sometimes struggle to get it done where it needs to happen. And procurement gets stuff done better than anyone else I've ever met as a profession. So, we need you, and we need procurement to make it happen, because that's the only way we're going to do it. So just do what you do best, procurement.
Thanks, Ollie.
On that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Oliver.